I got into agronomy because I bought a saddle.
Would meet back at the pickup and trailer, and I'd be like, hey, I got to take you out to something real quick. And we'd have to both go back out there. So
it might just be below ground at this point and at low levels, but I can still find it with this test and help prevent it.
Well, this is a big battle going on in ag, especially right now, is the information and the data.
And if someone hit a home run one year, I think everyone's going to want to know what that person did.
Welcome to another episode of On the Horizon. This week, we've got some real cool in-house guests from our agronomy team. Dr. Audrey Kalil rejoins us, and we have Sara Erickson on for the first time this year. We had a great conversation about a lot of fall burn down type stuff and fighting resistance and the importance of getting out there and spraying your fields in the fall to help set you up for success for the following year. So I encourage you to take a listen, hear about crop nutrients and our internship program and all the other exciting things that, even though the combines are rolling right now, the agronomy team is still working hard for you to make sure that you will be successful next year. I'm excited for you to listen to this one. Enjoy the show.
Need reliable propane delivery? Look no further than Horizon Resources. If you see our trucks with their signature yellow fenders, you know there's another satisfied customer taken care of. If you see our trucks, but we're not coming to you, it's time to call Horizon Resources. Take advantage of our summer rates and be prepared for winter. Offer good until September 30th.
Welcome to another episode of On the Horizon. This week, we have two in-house guests from Horizon Resources. Once again, Dr. Audrey Kalil, welcome back to the podcast. And Sara Erickson, welcome to your first episode of On the Horizon. So, Audrey, for anybody that maybe didn't listen to your episode, why don't you give just a little bit of a reintroduction of yourself and your role here at Horizon Resources?
Sure. So I'm Audrey Kalil. I joined Horizon Resources in January as an agronomist and outreach coordinator. I worked as a plant pathologist at the North Dakota State Williston Research Extension Center for 8 years previous to that. And I have my PhD in plant pathology and plant breeding and genetics.
Awesome. Thanks, Audrey. And Sara, why don't you give us a little bit of your background?
Well, I grew up in Williston, graduated from high school here, went to NDSU, and ended up transferring out of there and graduating from Minot State with a degree in social work. I got into agronomy because I bought a saddle.
So how does that transition work? How you went from buying a saddle and you're like, now I got to pay for this?
Yeah, I needed to pay for it. So I got a job at AgVice Laboratories as a lab tech and worked there for 5 years. And, scooping that soil, I would just look through it and it was so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting a job with a private crop consultant and from there, went soil sampling and then turned into a crop scout, and the rest just kind of snowballed into what I'm doing now.
Sure. So you started in the Red River Valley. Then.
Yes, I started in the Red River Valley.
And then was Galva your next move?
Yes, Galva was my next move after working for Central for about almost 10 years.
Okay. And then you went to Galva, which you were there about the same time that I went to Beach.
Yes.
And so we were neighbors. And you ran the location for CHS Farmers Elevator, which is the group based out of Circle, Montana.
Mm-hmm.
And that location was kind of a nice little one-stop shop where you had your feed, your chemical, and your agronomy. There was no elevator. Well, the elevator was there when they bought it. But I think it made it about a half hour.
Yeah, they tore that one down pretty quick once they got a hold of it. But yeah, it was an amazing learning experience. Going from private consulting into retail, learned a lot of the business aspects out of it. Occasionally got to sneak away and do some fun agronomy out in the field stuff, and learned a lot about feed. That was a really fun part of it too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a fun place.
Yeah. And that was a location. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but you were the location manager. So So then when you came to Williston, it was something, I know you and I have had this conversation where you're like, to not have to deal with the management side, there's definitely days where that's plenty nice.
Oh, yeah. It's been so much fun to be able to be back out in the fields doing the things that I like, which is crop scouting, soil sampling, working with the farmers, being able to do the precision ag prescription maps for the farmers again, is just been, I love my job.
Yeah.
It's a blast being here.
Yeah, we sure love having you. It's been a great addition to the team. Both of you have been a lot of fun to have around that office, bring so much experience and so much knowledge. And each of you kind of in your own different way. It's really fun, and we're going to get into that a little bit today. But first, one of the main things that I believe, Audrey, you kind of spearheaded this program and then ended up being somebody that spent a lot of time with you. A couple weeks ago, we had Abby Uffelman on the podcast here as our intern for the year. Why don't you guys talk a little bit about the internship program? Audrey, maybe a little bit on the starting of the program, and then Sara, I know she spent a lot of days out on the four-wheeler with you. So a little bit about that program from that aspect as well.
Sure. So I've been working with the Williston State College Ag program for a while. I'm on their advisory board, and it's just a great resource in our backyard. And I know Austin went and talked about Horizon Resources in the class there. That's where Abby kind of learned about Horizon. And then when I first started, I reached out to the instructor over there, Jesselyn Batchelor, and asked her if there would be any students that would be interested. And she connected us with Abby. And then Abby came in and visited with Austin and I. She was interested. And yeah, it just went from there. It worked out really well.
Yeah, a true home run of an intern. Just could not have been happier with the way that program worked out this year.
Mm-hmm.
So Sara, on a daily level, what was it like having Abby with you, kind of really having her under your wing and mentoring her, bringing all your years of experience and the variety of things you've seen? Talk a little bit about that mentorship.
Oh, Abby was so fun. She was so easy to train, show her what we did when we were scouting, and she picked everything up quickly. It was great because this year our acres that we were scouting increased a lot. And with me being the only one out there, having her there to help me cover those acres, was amazing. She, we would split. We were like, these fields are yours, these are mine. She'd go scout and I'd do mine. And then we'd come back, I taught her quickly, if you don't know what it is, just text me a picture. And so I'd get pictures, we'd answer questions. If she needed me, I'd go look at what she wanted. But it was fun. It was nice having her.
I mean, when I was a crop scout, we didn't have that luxury of, picture text messaging wasn't really a thing. And so it was more, would meet back at the pickup and trailer, and I'd be like, hey, I got to take you out to something real quick. And we'd have to both go back out there. So the advances in technology sure makes it a little bit easier.
Oh, it's wonderful because, that was the same when I first started scouting. Yeah. It would be I'd find something. Sometimes I could, where I was at down in Northwood, we had sketchy internet. So sometimes I could send a picture, sometimes I couldn't. But there was a lot of calls. Hey, come look at this because I have no idea what's going on right here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that internship program, one of the reasons I bring it up, we're hoping Abby comes back next year, but the ball's in her court there. But it's a program that we're not shying away from. It's something that we're probably going to grow, whether that's out of the Williston location or one of the other locations. So I know we talked about it in Abby's podcast episode. If you or someone might be interested in this, reach out to either Audrey or whoever in the agronomy side especially. But it's a program that we're looking to increase, not decrease.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say people shouldn't be afraid if they don't have an agriculture background not to apply. The work is, you're outdoors in the elements. Sometimes you're in the warehouse helping out. So there's a lot of variety. I would say just a love of being outside, a good work ethic. fast learner. Those are the types of traits we're looking for, and it doesn't necessarily have to come with someone who's raised on the farm.
Yeah, best tan I ever had in my life was over the Dog Scout. So if that's something that's important to you, look us up. Would love to bring some more people into the fold here. So I know this is a little weird to start talking about next year, the 2025 crop, especially as combines are kind of just getting rolling. But one of the main goals of this podcast when we started it was we don't want people to think that we're just thinking about the seasons as they're right in front of our nose. This is something that we live and breathe every day, and we're constantly trying to think 3 years down the road or a season or two down the road. We're working with these producers on how to make them not just successful this year, but we want to be that solution every year, and we want them to be successful every year. So let's talk a little bit about some of these things that people can start thinking about and putting in the back of their head as they're driving around in the combine to make sure 2025 is as successful as can be.
My favorite is farmers that have a set rotation.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have a rotation, there's train wrecks.
Yeah.
Our weed pressure is just going to continue to get worse as more resistance comes around because no new chemicals are being manufactured. There's lots of new products that come out, but they're mainly just mixes of chemicals that we've already been using. And we've had to go back to old products to try to get some control of, one of our big issues is pigeon grass or green foxtail. And, we need that. And if you have a rotation, if you know what you're going to be going on each field year after year, at least a general idea, it helps. We can plan what chemistry we're going to be putting out there. And even like for fertilizer, what we need to do, because, there are problem areas out in those fields, fertility-wise, that people don't necessarily catch until we start soil sampling them.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Sarah, because from the grain marketing side, it's something that looking at assembly sheets, looking at the quality raised, I can tell you who has a rotation that they stick to and who tries to jump and chase markets. And to me, it has always been the most successful farmers that I've worked with have been the ones that get on a program and work very closely with their agronomists, and they may not be selling the hottest market out there or what was in the spring, because a lot of times we kill those markets. We do it to ourselves. But they stick with the game plan. And because of that, they see agronomic benefits that lead to higher yields, higher quality. And at the end of the day, it allows for them to be more successful. The other thing that you talked about was, especially on the chemical game, the FarmQA program is one that we've been really pushing, and I can't say enough good things about it. I love it. So why don't you talk a little bit more about that FarmQA program?
FarmQA is so amazing. It's very user friendly. That's one of the first things that I loved, noticed about it when I started using it. There's lots of rotation wise. There's a way that we can put out, you have multiple years in there, and I can even make it so that if we wanted to go out to 2027 or further with your rotation, we could put those in there. Mm-hmm. And you could see what it would look like for your farm. Chemical wise, if we get all of that information put into your farm, it shows not only what you've been using, but it also shows which chemical groups you've been using. Yeah. So if you've been rotating away, you might be using two different products, but they might only be group 1s or group 2s, So you'll know whether or not you're actually rotating groups, not just names.
That's a great point. And I think that that's something that's not a lot of guys think about. They think, well, I switched from product X to Y, but if they're in the same bucket, you're still going to see that resistance. You're still going to be breeding resistance in your fields. So it's very important. It's a great tool for that. We also had a guy this spring that came in and wanted to put in a whole bunch of lentils because that was one of those hot markets this spring. And, FarmQA flagged that and said, whoa, look at what we've been putting on your field here. Would not recommend going in. So from that standpoint, from your yearly planning, it's such a great tool.
Yeah, it does. It helps. And there's so many aspects of it. I do a lot of the inputting. I'm hoping this winter to get some more training so I can get the customers to do a little bit more of their inputting about their farm stuff. And then they'll have control over what gets seen and what, we don't share that information with anybody. It's for our departments, so it doesn't get shared to anybody else. It's none of the other farmers in our FarmQA can see their information is private.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I like to stress is because people do get a little bit like, who all can see this and do you share it with other people? And it's like, no, we don't.
Well, this is a big battle going on in ag, especially right now, is the information and the data. And, Horizon Resources doesn't share any of our producer data with anyone outside of our walls. That is that producer's data. The only reason that we look at it and we use it is to maximize their success.
Yes.
So I think that's really important to point out, especially with how hot button of an issue it has been recently. The other thing, as we're getting into, it's hard to believe, but my wife and I were talking last night about how it's amazing how short the days are already getting. So that means fall is coming. College football kicks off here shortly. So it's hard to believe, but that means fall is here. And I think one of the best ways to be ahead of the game for spring is that you do your soil sampling in the fall, and it gives you an opportunity to plan your fertilizer blends as soon as possible, take advantage of any early pricing when it's available. And if you want to wait, you at least know, well, this is how much I'm going to need to buy. It puts the ball a little bit more in your court. It leverages that a little bit more. And it's not just nutrient management that we can be doing some soil testing for. So why don't you guys talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Fall soil testing is, in my opinion, a must. There's one, I have the time to do fall soil sampling.
Yeah.
That's the big one. Two, time. In the spring, there's just not time. And if we had a wet winter, me getting out into a field in the spring is not guaranteed. And like you said, if we do the fall sampling, we can look over your fields, and if you really needed it, it can be used for going to your banker for your loans. It helps with the pre-buying.
Yeah.
You have an idea. I mean, it's telling you right there, if this is what you're looking for, this is how much you need to buy for your whole farm.
Yeah.
If we sample all your fields.
Well, and I think too, when you look at the crop that it looks like we've got and the early yield reports that are coming in, things look good, which to me means that we used every ounce of nutrient that we could out of that field, which is great. And it's healthy. But we're going to be busy this next spring at the Agronomy Center because we're going to have to put so much back into the soil to help grow another crop next year. And that also, when you do that fall soil sampling, it helps us know how much do we need to have on. If we see that we're going to need to bring in a bunch of extra potash this coming year, that's good to know for us too. It allows us to not have to go out and buy at the market in the spring, because that market's going to be a lot more expensive than if we can lay that in October, November. So it's not just benefiting you directly because you know what's going on in the field, but financially it allows us to help work with you and be your partner.
True. It rolls into everything where, for us to buy to get you the better price, to, making sure that you have enough. I mean, no one wants to be the retail location that runs out of fertilizer.
Yeah, no kidding.
And, I've been here for 2 years now, and this would be my third summer. Looking at the past soil sampling years, there isn't a lot of people that build their fertility. So when we test in the fall, I'm finding like our top 6 inches, there's not a lot there ever.
Yeah.
And so people need to be watching that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Audrey, now one of the things that we can do is test not just for soil nutrients, but talk about some of the soil testing that you can do this fall.
Right. So there's a new test available, and they can use a DNA-based approach to identify pathogens which attack our peas and lentils. So I'm afraid to say this past summer, in some cases, we had amazing lentils and peas, and in some cases, we had a bit of a wreck. And when I went into those fields, I found root rot. And we know who's responsible for that root rot. In the vast majority of cases, we're dealing with a pathogen called Aphanomyces. And this test is specific to the Aphanomyces that can cause disease on peas and lentil. So if we sample your field and we flag that pathogen, that could be a field you probably don't want to go into for a while with peas and lentils. So it can be used in a couple of ways. I think the simplest way to use this test is to go into your pea and lentil fields from this season after harvest and test based on yield. So your high, medium, low yielding areas, we can do that just based on a yield map from your yield monitor and submit those. And that's been a really good way to tell whether you have the pathogen there or not, because it increases every time you grow a crop. And there's always going to be a detection threshold. If there's just a tiny bit of pathogen there, it's really hard to tell based on the test whether you have it or not. So if we sample, say, a field you want to go into peas or lentils, well, if that field hasn't been peas or lentils for 5 or 6 years, it might be hard to tell whether that pathogen's there or not. So if it's there, that's definitely a red flag in that case. If it's not there, and it's been maybe just 2 years since you've been a pea or lentil crop, I'd still proceed with caution. But it's a great way to tell whether that field is flagged or not. And once a field is flagged for that pathogen, then you want to be in a much longer rotation with peas and lentils so that you can keep that field in pea and lentil production for the length of your farm career.
So the only way, if I have you come out, you test one of my fields and I get flagged as, kind of a higher level, the only way to fix that is going to be to rest.
Yeah, you just got to rotate to non-host crops. So, if you want to stick with the legume, chickpea is an option. If you have an annual crop rotation with alfalfa in the rotation there are varieties of alfalfa that are resistant to Aphanomyces. So that's an option too if you want that legume still in your rotation. Otherwise, any legume crop or non-pea or lentil crop is going to be a rotation option. Sure. So your canola, flax, durum, wheat, barley, all of those are options.
Awesome. So it's not like we're taking the whole tool bag away. It's here's an option for you, and here's how, once again, you can be the most successful, because nobody wants to make that call to crop insurance and say, hey, we're a little disappointed here. This is what's going on. I think everybody wants to have the best yield possible.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the sad thing about root rot is that once it becomes really problematic in a field, like, 50 to 70% of that field is affected, the pathogen can live for 10 years or more. And so we really don't want to get to that point, because you could do a 10-year rotation in that field. And if you happen to get kind of a wet, rainy spring, the next time you go to a pea or lentil, it can still be a wreck. So that's why it's so important to be preventative. And that's why I'm really excited about this test, because it's going to detect it way before you see problems in your field, because it might just be below ground at this point and at low levels, but I can still find it with this test and help prevent you from getting to that point.
Awesome. Well, that's a very useful tool once again. And so if it's something where you're thinking about going into peas and lentils or recently coming off a pea or lentil field, those are the best fields to go into and do this soil sample.
Yeah.
So give Audrey a call if you're in either of those buckets, because it will pay for itself easily if you are preventing a disaster.
Yeah, definitely.
So the other thing that's coming up, fall burn down season, is something that I am a huge believer in. I've seen guys try and cut corners when commodity prices dip and say, well, I'm not going to do my fall burn down. And from 2 miles away driving down the road, I can tell you on March 15th whether or not that guy did a fall burn down. So to me, the most effective kill is when that when that weed is less than 4 or 5 inches tall. Let's get out, let's get after it early. That's going to help with some of the resistance issues. But let's talk a little bit about the importance of fall burn down.
You know, coming from the Red River Valley, one of the things that was big down there, we're putting pre's down. And that's where, for us, our fall burn down is where we get our pre's on. Valor. You know, that's my new favorite chemical this year. When I get out in the spring and start riding fields, and I ride through a field and I'm not seeing any weeds in it, and I go, what did you do? And they're like, we put Valor down. I was like, nice.
Yeah.
You know, and I hit another guy's field, same thing, was Valor. And I'm like, okay, we like this one. It's a good one. It's getting more and more affordable. The generics are out there now. So Valor is going to be under $5 an acre to apply. And, you know, we've got 2 sprayers out there now that we can use for custom application. So, you know, I'm hoping more people will put it down this year.
Yeah, I think that especially with, like you said, the cost has come down a little bit to under $5 an acre. And that's something that, you know, I've seen the Facebook posts already of, you know, hey, inputs aren't coming down. And this is the exception to the rule right now. And there are a lot of different inputs that haven't come down. Obviously, crop prices aren't where they were at the beginning of the year. But to me, this is something that it's a little bit of an olive branch here, and I would take advantage of it because I see it on the grain side in the quality at harvest because that crop hasn't had to compete with those weeds. So to me, it's something that I'm a huge believer in fall burn down.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, we saw a lot of weeds like horseweed and narrowleaf hawksbeard, and those are the things that are really important to control with this fall Valor application. So that can be prevented.
Yeah. Well, and fall burn down, and a pre, it helps in the long term of cutting your costs in season.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's part of looking forward to 2025.
Yep.
Planning for that crop year. If you're starting in the fall, it can help you in the next year.
That's a great point, Sarah, because yes, it might be less than $5 per acre, but it's not an additional $5 per acre on top of your typical cost of productions. This is something that's going to save you money come 2025. And I think that's really important to know. I know sometimes spending money doesn't feel like saving money, but this is certainly a case where it works.
Yeah, and there were cases where narrowleaf hawksbeard kind of escaped, and then it was an additional herbicide application to catch it because it is so competitive with Durham. So yeah, you could be ahead of the game or behind the game. You kind of have to pick your poison, and it's a lot easier to be ahead of the game.
For sure, absolutely. And like I said, we talked about resistance. Every time you have an agronomist on, you talk resistance and how do we stop this? This is one of the great ways. Get it before it becomes a problem.
100%.
So the other thing that we've got going on right now, we've got a yield contest going on. I believe that applications were already due. We've started to see a couple of yields roll in. It's still real early, but let's talk a little bit about that contest and how entries were submitted and what that process is going to be this year.
Sure. So it's modeled after the National Wheat Contest. It's just a way to kind of celebrate the hard work our member customers do all year long and just kind of fun. Competition's always a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
Entries are all in and we have our rules all set up. And They have till October 1st to submit their grain sample. So they're going to take a grain sample at harvest moisture, so we can calculate yield based on the moisture content. And then we're going to take it over the elevator, and it's going to get graded. We'll have test weight and protein measured. And then they'll also get submitted to the wheat commission for milling and quality testing. So it's a great way to take all the work that we've done this season and kind of measure how we did. And I think it'll be fun for everybody to see what happens.
Yeah. And the really neat part too, so we submit a lot of samples, and the Wheat Commission collects that data just as generic. So you'll get to kind of see how yours stacks up to the report that the Wheat Commission sends out in November. And you'll be able to see, okay, how did I stack up? Maybe I've got a higher quality milling thing. Is there any price premiums for it? Probably not, but it's something that you can take pride in. I know that's something that every one of us, we're out here trying to do our best. So if you want that information, you want to know how you're stacking up compared to the norm, I think it'll be a really fun deal to kind of look at.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, the data is all going to be private. The farmer's just going to get their own information. We're not going to share that, but we hope people are willing to share a little bit.
Yeah.
Because, we're all learning from each other. And if someone hit a home run one year, I think everyone's going to want to know what that person did.
Yeah, and it's great for us, too, to be able to go back and say, well, this field looks very similar to Farmer X's field, and we want to try and implement that over here on Farmer Y's field, and we've seen that this works, and we can prove that this works. So I think from that standpoint, it's another tool that, yes, we're putting it into a competition format. You have the opportunity to win a $2,000 Traeger grill, but there's still going to be benefit beyond that. It's not just about winning that grill. So from that standpoint, I'm very excited about the contest. I think it's going to be really fun. Plus, we coupled it up with a year that everything looks above average, right, to be conservative. So that makes it even more fun.
Yeah, exactly. Something to celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that we've got coming up, and I hate saying the winter word already, but we've always done a series of meetings in February, March, but it sounds like this year we may still have those meetings, but we're also probably going to add something in more October, November, December. Why don't you guys talk a little bit about that?
Well, we usually have our seed meeting in October. I would like to add some additional fertility meetings. I was discussing with a grower yesterday about, he's like, we get the soil reports, but I would like to understand them a little bit better. And I was like, so what you're saying is I need to get someone out here that will explain it a little bit more in depth for you. And he's like, yes, please.
Yeah.
And I would also, our fertilizers that we carry, one of them is a premium fertilizer. And, I just assumed that everybody understood that. And talking to some people, they didn't really understand that. So I would like to get our rep to come out and go through why we're carrying that product. S10 is amazing. Mm-hmm. And, some FarmQA trainings. I want to get, like I said, I have personal goals to get more of the farmers actually using it so I don't have to put everything in.
Yeah.
Just because it really is very helpful for them. I know there are so many other programs out there. There's a lot of people using the John Deere stuff for their information, but this is just a really good record-keeping program. And we can put so many things. When I do my prescription maps for them, I can throw those in there. I need to start getting to show them a little bit more of what it can do, because when I do meetings, we just touch on the very basics. There's a whole lot we can do with it that, and they can use it as much as they want or as little.
Yeah. And I would say, as someone who is new coming in, it was fantastically useful because, I was primary Abby and Sara scouting, but when I was able to get out there and help them, we could work as a team, and we'd be like, oh, here. And we all had it on our phones. Yeah. And not only could you tell the field, but you could tell where you were in the field. Yeah. And you could flag something, say, I found a huge patch of Canada thistle. You can flag that exact point, and you'll know where, forever where that patch was and be able to track it over time. So And then as Sara was saying, your herbicide prescription gets plugged in there. Well, you're going to be able to track that over years so that 2 years down the road, when you want to be in lentils, we can tell if that's going to be a problem or not, which 2 years ago, that's tough to remember.
Yeah.
But if this program is keeping all of it, it's a much easier way to collaborate.
Well, and think about the thousands of acres that you two cover each year. And to say, I remember where on Farmer Brown's, section 32, whatever, that this one field always has Canada thistle along the east edge. Okay, well, that's good to know if we're sending an intern out there, or if Farmer Brown himself wants to go out there and check that field out and see how we're doing keeping that under control. To me, it's very beneficial because, like you said, it's something where if we always know that field edge or that low spot is gathering something like a Canada thistle, to be able to target that and monitor that over the years is wildly beneficial.
Yeah, and you can take a picture and text them the scouting report right to their phone.
Yeah.
So it's super cool.
Yeah.
I use FarmQA when I'm soil sampling too, because when I'm out soil sampling, I can see the weeds that escaped, and I'll add those into scouting reports.
Sure.
Just as notes, or if there's like spots in the field that I'm like, I need to remember, it helps me. When I worked on the east side of the state, we covered 100,000 acres, but we covered 100,000 acres with 5 people.
Yeah.
And we covered them every week. I think my biggest scouting day here was, I think I did 5,000 acres in a day.
Yeah.
I don't remember what I did on the first field.
Yeah.
That's why I take notes, lots of notes.
Yeah.
When I first started scouting, we had paper maps.
Right.
And so it's such a phenomenal program. Yeah. And the information that we can keep for those fields is, it helps. I can look back. I can, when they start talking about a field, I can say, oh yeah, I remember that one. That was the one that had the kochia patch right down in that little draw.
Yeah.
So, which means when we start seeing a kochia patch down in that little draw, that we should probably start looking at the salt issues down there.
Right. Yeah. So we're thinking above and beyond just what's right in front of us. We're thinking, what is the root of that problem?
Yeah. For me, it's like when I'm out in a field and I start looking at stuff, I go, okay, why is it there? Mm-hmm. A lot of times it's like right now when you start seeing combines go, you can see where the kochia tumbleweed just rolled right across that field. And it's like, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
But, for me, I always think of soil sampling as the beginning of my year.
Right.
Because I start soil sampling, I get all that stuff back and get to look at it. And then if I'm lucky enough, I get to make prescriptions for those fields from some of the guys. And I'm very competitive. So when it gets to this time of the year, I love to go ride in the combine with them and see. I'm like, did it turn out as well as what I was hoping for?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So if you got the buddy seat warmed up, let Sara know. She'll come ride along with you.
Yeah.
So the last thing I wanted to talk about with you guys, and I believe, Audrey, this has kind of been one of your pet projects, but our weekly newsletter, I should say just newsletter. Through the summer, it was weekly. Now as we kind of get away from the heavy in-season, it's going to space back out a little bit. But talk a little bit about that newsletter. If you're not receiving it, how do you receive it, and what kind of information is in it?
Great. So during the season, our goal was just to kind of make everyone aware of what they should be thinking about right now, what we're seeing out in fields right now that they might want to be aware of, and then kind of looking down the road, what's a plan for, what we have, in terms of our toolbox for, say, a certain weed we're seeing a lot of. And then more recently, we've been talking about, hey, soil sampling, prescription mapping. These are tools. Think about it. And if you're interested, reach out. So it's kind of like what's going on right now and then what's coming up to kind of get everybody on the same page. We have a long list of growers currently receiving it. If you want to receive it and you're not, feel free to reach out to me or any of your Horizon Resources agronomy locations. And this fall, you want to keep an eye on it, because if we have meetings, that's where we're going to be putting things. If it's time to book your inoculant or your canola seed or whatever, we're going to be giving you a heads up in the newsletter. So it's going to space out a little bit, but there's definitely still going to be really important, relevant information shared.
Yeah. Well, 572-8354 is the phone number for the Williston Agronomy Office. So even if you utilize one of the other Horizon Resources locations, and we talked about something here that you got questions about, you can call and talk to either Sara or Audrey, or you can talk to your location manager too. A lot of the stuff we talked about was maybe Williston specific, but that doesn't mean that we're not walking fields through some of our other locations. So talk to your location managers if that's something that you're interested in, getting the FarmQA program going in your area. It is available to any of our Horizon Resources customer. This isn't just a Williston thing. So, look us up. Don't be afraid to utilize, the talent that we have at Horizon Resources is for all patrons. It is not location or zip code specific. So look us up and let us know if you have any questions.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you carving time out of your day. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to On the Horizon. If our conversation today sparked your interest, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. Stay connected by following @Horizon Resources Co-op on Facebook and Instagram, and explore the world of agriculture with us. We're excited to continue bringing you real conversations with Horizon Resources industry partners, member owners, and employees, discovering more about your local neighbors and community friends. Until next time, keep looking towards the horizon. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not to be used or considered as an offer or a solicitation to buy or sell commodities. Horizon Resources does not make any representation, warranty, or guarantee as to the completeness, accuracy, timeliness, or suitability of any information contained within any part of this podcast. Horizon Resources does not accept any liability for any loss or damage, including without limitation loss of profit, which may arise directly or indirectly from use or reliance on such information. Whilst the information provided has been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, Horizon Resources does not attest to its accuracy or completeness. Horizon Resources reserves the right to change any source without restriction or notice. The information herein is indicative only and is subject to change.